Hey, welcome back to Lost in the 80s with Rich and Brian.
Hello.
Decided to switch things up a bit. We didn't plan on doing this episode till probably later in the year, probably closer to Christmas, but just so happens where I'm at, which is in southwestern Indiana, we woke up to a snow day today, so totally unplanned. But this episode is going to be talking about, growing up in the 80s and, that excitement as a kid when you find out that you do not have school today. So that's what we're going to focus on. So, Rich, thanks for being here as always. How would you? I mean, I know we grew up about an hour apart, but I'm sure we had some similar experiences growing up as kids in the 80s dealing with being out of school. What was just kind of give your overview of how you found out, how maybe you kind of prepared. Did your parents say, hey, here's the forecast, and you kind of got excited about it, or was it usually just you know a surprise the next day?
Yeah, so I went to daycare. My grandma owned a daycare. So every morning, my mom went to work at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and then my dad worked in Indianapolis, so he would leave at like 5:30. And they would, bundle me and my sister up, take us to daycare, drop us off at my grandma's. And there were probably another 10 or 12 kids like my age that would show up. So Unionville school was a pretty small school, just like you attended a small school. Like somebody in the daycare was probably usually already in on the proceedings, like, are we going to cancel? Are we not going to cancel? So we did, like, the night before, I remember listening to the radio to find out if we were going to cancel, like B97. We would listen to that, and they would sometimes say if we were going to cancel. But if the snow wasn't real bad yet and you were waiting until the next morning, I would usually just know because someone or my grandma would come in and say, hey, school's canceled. Unionville would always let her know because she had like 25 kids or something that rode the bus. And so half the kids in my school at one time or another had gone to my grandma's daycare. So it wasn't as, I think, a lot of, like, especially now with technology, our kids know immediately because we get it, like, in the school district we're in Oklahoma, you get a text message that says, like, school's been canceled. So it's literally the minute the people make the decision, right away. Where, I would go to my grandma's house with my backpack, lunchbox, the whole thing, and then sometime in that area, I'd find out that we weren't having it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think things are different now. I mean, like you said, you found out pretty quickly. See the kind of snow that we got overnight, and it was a little slick. It was really windy, and this time of year you're just not really expecting to get snow, at least where I am. But the difference is it's so easy right now in 2025 to just say, hey, we'll just have the kids log in and they can do their assignments, and nobody has to get out. So I think as a kid today, it's probably like it's not as big of a deal, like the excitement level to not have school, because like when we would miss a day, I felt like it had to be they didn't cancel school for like 3 or 4 inches of snow. It was generally 5 or 6 inches expected, or maybe it had already fallen overnight. But the stuff that they get out for today just simply didn't happen, back in the 80s. But my my brother and I, it almost seemed like every snowstorm would like come in overnight. You'd watch the weather, the 10 or 11 o'clock weather. For me, it was either Channel 2 with Jesse Walker or Channel 10 with Kevin Warper. But it would be, hey, snow developing overnight. Expect to see it start falling around daybreak, things like that. So my brother and I, anytime there was snow expected, we would almost always sleep in the living room on the pull-out sofa bed, and we'd both like we couldn't even go to sleep. Like we'd be so excited.
Yeah,
But so
yeah.
we lived. Our house was right along a pretty busy highway, Highway 41, which that highway literally goes from the tip of Michigan all the way to the southern part, or actually Miami. Very, very major, major highway that tens of thousands of cars are on every single day. So if we woke up in the middle of the night, you'd look for two things. Number one, you know, you would hope to see some sort of lights, like the spinning yellow caution lights on top of like a snow removal snowplow.
Yeah, right,
So you're
sure.
thinking, okay, well, if there's that means there's snow on the way, or maybe they were pre-treating the roads, like this is really happening. But the main thing was we could tell very quickly how fast the traffic was going. If you just heard cars zooming by, we're like, oh man, like, nothing happened. But if they're going, you can tell if they're going slow. And, if we woke up at 4 in the morning and we could tell, that was exciting because we knew like, okay, it must be bad. So that was the exciting part. And then for us, it wasn't so much the radio, but we had it was the crawl along the bottom of the TV where it would say the different school districts. And they would just went in alphabetical order. We were Southwest. So Southwest School Corporation. So we had a long wait to get near the end of that. Once we saw Southwest, it was game over.
Yeah.
And the excitement could start. But very
Yeah, I
rarely
know.
was it canceled the night before, unless we were going on day two. So day one, it's canceled. And then usually that 6 o'clock news, sometimes the 11 o'clock news, they will go ahead and say, they would go ahead and list the school closings. But um, yeah, we just found out usually around 6 a.m. the next day whether or not we had school.
Yeah, and what I remember is we didn't have a lot of snow days. I do think you're right. Distance learning has changed that. Now we live in Oklahoma now and not Indiana. So if there are a smattering of flakes falling at some point in the daytime, they just say, yeah, we're canceling school because we don't have salt. We don't have salt trucks here. So they'll put sand down, but they will not put sand down until the storm is over. There's no sense in putting it down right in the middle because more snow is just going to fall on top of it. So if there's, 2, 3, 4 inches of snow here, it's probably going to close school at least 2 days. What I remember growing up is that there was to me, there was always this dread, like they're not going to like this is not enough to cancel. Like if 3 inches fell, you were like, yeah, we're definitely going to school tomorrow. I was kind of bitter at the school board. Like, let us have a day here. Give us a couple. So I think I remember probably I think it was on average, like maybe 3 to 5 snow days a year is probably about what we had. I do remember a couple of bad winters when I was a little older, but in the 80s, it wasn't like that. And again, my snow experience was different than yours because if they did happen to cancel the night before, I do remember a few days where that happened. When I got to stay, my parents would just leave me at my house, and I lived in a neighborhood with 20 other kids my age. And then if I went to my grandma's, I was with a different 15 or 20 kids my age. So our snow days I feel like the experience was kind of ramped up because, we were having massive snowball fights. She had a huge hill that you could sled down, like all of the activities. You wore the like ridiculous moon boots and the full snowsuit, and then you go out and you literally stay out until you're nearly, frostbitten. But I always had a bunch of people to share that with, which I thought, it felt different to me than if you just are sitting at home watching one of your 3 channels that were available when we had a snow day.
Yeah. Yeah. I always remember, it's like if you actually had school that day, you were so tired. But when you don't have school, like you're ready to get up at 6.
Yeah.
You just kind of you get things going. But for me, it was always like, okay, how much can I fit in this day? Are we going to go sledding? Are we going to build a snowman? I want to play Nintendo. But more than likely, it's around, if not before Christmas, it's going to be after Christmas time. So maybe you're playing with toys that you just got over the past 2 or 3 weeks. So if it's in January, so you just got a bunch of stuff for Christmas, and it's like how much can you fit in the day, to maximize everything that you're doing. So like I said, we lived alongside Highway 41, and right beside a county road. It was easy to hop on there. And my dad would he had an old truck that he would always tie up. He would tie up or take a rope and tie a sled to the back of the truck, and then we would just go down the county roads that obviously they don't plow. So just kind of creating your own tracks, and the snow was still, good size, deep. So, you had plenty of powder underneath you to really get some good movement. Every now and then you'd come across those areas where, maybe a vehicle had driven over it. So, you're just kind of bouncing up and down that gravel or that pavement. And that could be painful. But yeah, when you still have that powder, you could really get moving. Every now and then you'd go through someone's or by someone's house, and they'd have a big dog, and that dog would chase you on the back of the sled. And my dad always thought it was funny to slow down at that point and let the dog get kind of close to us before he would take off again. But yeah, sledding was just so much fun. So I don't know if you did that kind of stuff, but for us for me it was different than, like, I didn't have like a hill to go to. It was literally just getting pulled. Now, I mean, sometimes I go in town to a friend's house, and there was a church that had a really nice hill that we would sled down, but if I stayed around my house, it was just getting pulled behind a truck.
Yeah, we had one really good hill, and if you somebody's parent maybe or my aunt or somebody would load you like a bunch of us up, and there was a great hill that went down around. I don't know if you've been to Lake Lemon before, but there's a little T road there that just little back roads that aren't plowed, and there was a massive hill that would go down towards the lake. The main issue is it crossed a road and then it went over these big rock drop offs and then the lake was below you. And if it was frozen enough, lots of times you could shoot all the way across the road, down the rocks, and then out onto the lake. But if there were cars coming, number one, or if the lake wasn't frozen enough, you could like nobody died or anything, but there were a few times where people were over the road and they were headed to the rocks and like I just remember like my little chubby like 10-year-old self just like jumping up and down like tell them to jump off the sled because you're about to drown. There's no way any of us are jumping in to get you. It's 30 degrees outside or whatever. So that hill was great, but there was a pretty good one right behind my grandma's house. The only problem was it did drop off into a ravine, so we laid a good sized log across it, but the log had some space underneath. So you had to, if you got going too fast, you'd have to reach up and hook the log so you didn't dive off into the ravine. All things that parents would never let their kids do today. And my parents were just oblivious at work, had no idea that we're on the edge of death on the snow day all the time. But yes, snowball fights were huge because there were a bunch of us. And then we did like to, I don't know if you did this or not, but it never looked exactly like an igloo, but we definitely worked very hard to build some kind of a structure that was big enough that you could actually get inside. Like we would, dig down into the snow, but then make these pretty intricate bricks. But when you've got like 12 or 14 of you working at it, then it turns out pretty cool. So we did a lot of, 12-year-old snow construction on snow days at the daycare. And then warming up
Yeah.
was always a big thing for us. Like going back inside, there's hot chocolate, there's some kind of a snack, like the finish to the snow day was also pretty great because, you knew that it was something different than because when we came home from the daycare, there was always some kind of to the daycare from school, there's always some kind of a snack, but it wasn't the, hot chocolate with marshmallows in it or whatever that we had warming back up. So that was a big part for me.
Yeah, yeah, you mentioned the snack part. I always remember I loved, and I still to this day, I don't really ever buy this anymore, but, just like, uh, Campbell's, uh, chicken noodle soup. Another one I liked was, and it's probably disgusting, but I always loved it. It was called I wanna say it was called Old Fashioned Vegetable, maybe? I think that's
Yeah,
what
I
it's
can
called,
guarantee I never ate that.
but, well, it had meat in it too. It wasn't just pure vegetable. But anyway, like that and, like, grilled cheese, I
Oh, yeah.
remember was
A
was
tomato a
was pretty
tomato
awesome.
soup with grilled cheese, yeah, was just epic snow
Yeah.
day food for sure.
That, and then, like, you'd have, like, sugar cookies or, something like that would normally be there as well. And then, of course, playing your like you said, because you can't just stay out for 8 hours. I mean,
Right,
it's
yeah.
just as much fun as you think you're having, you're even through the gloves and through your boots, like, your toes and fingers are just throbbing because of the frigid feel, you get it's so easy and I'm sure back then, obviously, our gear was not what it is now.
Yeah, it was
Their
lacking a little bit.
water, moisture was getting inside, like your wrist, that area here, and then that part of the glove or, your scarf or your not, yeah, toboggan. I mean, I always wore toboggan. I never wore
Yeah,
like earmuffs or anything, but a toboggan and then, putting the hood over it. But yeah, because that stuff's great if you're just standing there, but you're a kid, you're not just gonna stand there. You're falling down, you're diving, you may be playing football, you may be having a snowball fight, or like you say, you're building something. So you have to come in probably at least every 45 minutes to an hour. You're going to come in for a few minutes. And that's when I remember playing, whatever video game I just got. It would have been a Nintendo game, of course. And that was just, those times were just always fun. Like the smell of, like, we had a fireplace. So just the smell of that wood, when you walked into the house and that heat hits you immediately and, you smell the fire burning and, probably a cartoon on in the background, and like I said, you got Nintendo playing. It was just a really, really awesome time to be a kid.
yeah, we had a wood burning stove also. House was heated with a wood burning stove, and I remember we like, if I was in my neighborhood playing and my mom was inside, she would always put like a towel or a blanket or something kind of on top of the stove to get it nice and warm. And then when I came in, I could just wrap in that warm blanket and drink some hot cocoa. Yeah, and that's when, like, when the sun started to go down and it got legitimately too cold to be outside, that's when we would really heavily involved in the Nintendo at that point. Yeah, so and a couple of buddies had come in who maybe didn't have the exact same family situation I had, so we'd sit around my console TV on the floor because it was like, 9,000 pound giant wooden box, that, which to me now, I'm wondering how we enjoyed looking at the ground watching TV. Like, because if, my dad's easy chair was like, 15 feet from where the TV was, and it was essentially sitting right on top of the ground.
Mhm.
And now, our TV is basically eye level, maybe just a little bit above when you're sitting.
Yeah.
It's a totally different experience. But yeah, so my mom would have something warm for us to put on, drink some hot cocoa, play some Nintendo. Yeah. Or the A Team usually came on right as it was getting dark in Bloomington when I was a kid. So that was an after dinner or after hot cocoa experience, was always watching, Hannibal say he loved it when a plan comes together.
Yeah, and, like, that nighttime, it was always like, "Man, what if we got another day?"
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
if they did go ahead and call it, it literally just made your entire week getting to miss a couple days of school. Remember some of the most, like, depressing moments would be, like, you see the weather and he's like, "Well," it's like, weather people, they talk to adults, they don't talk to kids.
Yeah.
So, like, they're wanting to give good news, which to them is not more snow or more cold. It's, "Hey, really good news, tomorrow it's gonna be 47 and sunny." So you're like, "Crap, I'm not gonna get another day." But, yeah, when you did hear it was gonna be, "Hey, it's gonna get down to 3 degrees tonight," and everything, even the stuff that's melted from, cars driving over it, no traffic, it's gonna refreeze, and, more than likely, roads are gonna be slick again tomorrow, so you knew that you would get that extra day, so that was always a lot of fun, but, yeah, just, such a good
Yeah,
time that I don't think kids get to experience today.
no, because you still have stuff to do, right? If when my kids were in high school after COVID, I still had 2 kids in high school after COVID. So if they had a snow day, they still, like, if we had a snow day in the 80s on Wednesday, when you got back to school on Thursday, you just did whatever was planned for Wednesday, and you were just a day behind. And remember, they would add days at the end of the year to make up for snow days, so you could get through all your material. Now you don't get a day behind, but you also, like, you might go out front and make a snowman for a little, but my kids were in class, like, they had to have cameras on. Like, it was like, because the school gave them laptops, so essentially, like, yeah, a little bit of snowfalls, which is great, right? Occasionally, it's awesome. They don't get behind and blah, 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 and all that stuff, but there is, yeah, the euphoria of being told, "Hey, you don't have to go to school today." And then I think even ramping that up, the euphoria of, just like you said, when the weatherman's like, "No, it's only getting worse," or, "It's still gonna be bad," 'cause you already found your groove today. So,
Yeah,
like, tomorrow is gonna be incredible. You were making plans on Wednesday, but if you're out on Thursday too, it's gonna be unbelievable. So, yeah, kids don't have that feeling. The anticipation part of, like, is it gonna be a snow day? And then the fact that there is nothing expected of you this day except for just total outdoor chaos is pretty great.
right, right. Yeah, so, yeah, this was kind of an, impromptu podcast today, but like I said, it was, just the idea of being November 10th, and we had a random snow day. It really made me start thinking, like I said, we wouldn't have, in the 80s, a day like this would not have happened. Oh, there's a little bit of snow, it's cold, kinda unexpected, so let's let everyone stay home. Anyway, so yeah, we just wanted to hop on and just kind of briefly talk about, in the 80s, how fun it was as a kid. So hopefully this has brought back some memories for a lot of you listeners, and maybe some of you not so old people can get to understand what it was like for us, as kids in the 80s, and how different it is today. So that's all I have. Rich, did you have anything you wanted to add here at the
I'm good.
end?
I do think everybody who is under the age of 35 should Google, like, moon boots and take a look at those bad boys, because just
Yeah,
I just remember walking in them was so complicated because they were floppy and rigid at the same time, and you can't understand that unless you wore a pair. Like, the bottom half was so rigid that you couldn't, like, if you wanted to run, it was literally like thunk, thunk, thunk. You were like some, Martian running on the moon or whatever, but
yeah,
the top part of it had no support whatsoever. Like, it was just a little rubber tube that you slid your foot into. So
Right.
It couldn't have been less effective or more uncomfortable, and every single kid had a pair. Like, the guy who designed them put no thought into it whatsoever, and he became a multimillionaire.
Right.
Yeah, moon boots were terrible.
Yep. For sure. All right, guys. Well, hey, thank you guys for listening slash watching, and stay warm. Lost in the 80s out.
See ya.